It's great to see so many people coming out for the talk. It's good that we died. All right. Bob Johnson, everybody.
So my subject is death, and my thesis is that it's good that we die. My argument is basically going to be that there are certain very fundamental ways that we think about our lives that are possible only because we die. Or to put it kind of differently, because we die, we think of our lives in very, very interesting and rich ways. Okay? Since those ways are so fundamental to us, and death makes it possible, then death is good. See the argument in a nutshell? So what I wanted to do was to kind of explain how I got there as part of just sort of explaining a little bit of like what do philosophers do? You know, what is this discipline like? And then I wanted to really quickly go over sort of basically five ways in which I think are fundamental to how we think about life, and you'll realize that each one of them wouldn't be possible if we did not die. Okay? So there you go. That's the argument, and we'll see what you think about it, you know, when I'm done. Now, I want to clear this up. I mean, maybe you're kind of getting the idea already. I really felt embarrassed about this title. It's good that we die. I think it's kind of a smack in the face. Okay? And I sort of felt like I was being dishonest. It felt like bait and switch. You know, put out something really tantalizing and pull it away. Because I'm not actually going to deny that there are bad deaths. There are bad deaths. And death is, in fact, can be a very tragic and unfortunate thing for us, okay? So I'm not going to deny that. That's not what I mean when I say it's good that we die, okay? I don't mean that we shouldn't fear death. I don't mean, although I frankly think we shouldn't, but I don't mean by my thesis that we shouldn't not want to die. You know, I would hate it if somebody came out from this and thought, well, hey, it's okay for me to die. You know, no, okay? You want to live as long as you can, okay? But when you die, okay, it's going to be okay. And I'm not arguing that, you know, that there are no such things as bad deaths. There are bad deaths. But the interesting thing is, while it's true that there are bad deaths, it's also true that it's good that, in the larger scheme of things, human beings are mortal. Okay? So I'm really arguing for mortality over immortality. See the difference? And I'm really arguing that it's good that we're part of this scheme in which we are not immortal. Immortality, I think, would probably be incomprehensible to us, but we can talk about that later. That's an interesting thing, okay? So that's sort of where I'm coming from. I want to tell you that I got started on this subject about 4 years ago, and what had happened is that I'd already had a lot of experience teaching about teaching and working out in the community on ethical issues at the end of life. Okay, this was something I already felt quite familiar and comfortable with. But I hadn't really focused on the subject of death directly. And one of the things that you learn, and one of the things I would say to you is that you must understand that dying and death are quite different. Okay? Dying is the process that gets you, in completion, to death, to being dead. But as long as you're dying, you're not dead. You're still alive. Okay? So, and the interesting thing is, I don't think we as a culture are all that good about dying. Okay? In fact, we even seem to drag out dying to avoid death. Okay? And, you know, one of the issues is that a good approach to the whole business. And I'm not so sure that it is. But that's the kind of the experience that led me to want to focus on death itself. Why is it that people are so afraid of death? Okay. Why is it that they seem convinced that it must be avoided? And so as I began to work on this, I started out first with the question, what is the significance of death for us? Where is the meaning? Okay, in what way does death have meaning for us? And I sort of thought about things in this kind of way. I was asking myself, and all this is a process that goes on. One of the processes of philosophy is you work from question to question to question, okay? And then you often go back and revise your questions. But it's really a process of working, reading everything you can get your hands on, talking with people, having good friends that you can go out for walks with and get some feedback for. That's one of the things I did a lot. I'd call up Brendan, we'd go out for a walk. He'd tell me what he's working on. I'd tell him what I'm working on. Okay, and and in the background, you're looking for that feedback that you want on, and that was what motivated me to say to Brendan one day, hey, do you think I could give a talk, to the philosophy students? So, now, and I do want to say something. I want to thank him for the work that he did to prepare this. Okay? But I also want to call attention to the philosophy professors that are here. Would you guys stand up? Okay, we've got Joe, we've got Doug. Okay.
That's 50%?
That's 50% of it. And I just want you to know that I'm really, really proud of this philosophy program, okay? These are really good teachers. They're all really good teachers. And I know firsthand because one of my responsibilities, as head of the program for a while, was to make visits. It was to go visit their classes and write up reports and so on. And I always was impressed, when I would visit these guys' classes, okay? They're really good people. So I'd really encourage you to take philosophy classes. And, they're so welcoming and they're such good teachers that, you'll really enjoy it. So I'd encourage you to do that. So anyway, so I started to look at the issue in this way. And I was asking myself, well, if I'm interested in finding the significance of death, where do I locate it? Where is it to be located? Is it essentially here in that period before my death, or is it in that period after my death, which I don't know what to put there? The line stops, okay? I guess I could put a big question mark, but I don't even like that, because I frankly think I know. But I don't think people would like what I think. Anyway, I subscribe to what's called the corpse view. Okay. Anyway, it's got a view. There is such a view. There's such a theory. Isn't that amazing? It's like, who would have to have a theory? But anyway, and what I realized as I was studying and reading the literature is that most of the literature is about this. It's about what happens to me after I die. Most of the literature is about that, with questions about, well, what becomes of us? Do I survive? Will I have my thoughts? Will I, have my cat and so on? Okay, so most of the literature, you go back to the ancients, and it's essentially about this period. There isn't a heck of a lot about this. It's not until really like the late 19th century, I'm thinking with Heidegger, and that you get people writing about, and Kierkegaard writing about the significance of death for the life that you're living. Well, after spending a lot of time working on this kind of thing, I wanted then to work more on this sort of, okay? And so I began to ask myself the question, how does it affect my understanding of life to know that it's going to end there, okay? And even if you think, by the way, if you're one of those who thinks, well, it keeps going, I would say to you, well, not this. Okay, like I won't be writing checks anymore. I won't show up for my appointments. My doctor will close my record. Things like that. That's going to stop. Now, if you want to say that, but something in me keeps going, that's perfectly fine. You can say that. Okay, but the biographical Johnson that started, in November 1946 and ends at some point, that's what I'm interested in. And I'm interested in how do you look at life in light of the fact that you know where it's going, okay? You know that it's going to end there. So how does that shape your conception of life? That's the way I'm looking at this. Okay? Now, I started off with thinking that there are at least three things that I can be certain of. One is that there's a day I will die. The second is that life will go on. And the third is I'm not going to actively participate. Okay? So I thought, if I'm going to think about what it is to die, to face my death, these are the facts that summarize that. It's the day where this is going to stop for me. Now I want you to notice that the day I die may not be the day that my life that I'm living. Let me start again. The day I die is not the same as the day I lose having a life. Okay? Because I could go into a coma or a persistent vegetative state next month, but not die for 10 years. Okay? So what interests us is not the death that happens in 10 years. What interests us is the end of having a life that will be, like in May. Okay? Something like that. Okay? So when it's interesting. When my cat doesn't know anything, but for us, what matters to us is really the end of having a life, okay, rather than death. So that's usually they happen at the same time, okay, but they don't have to, okay. Okay. So, interested in this: how does the fact that we die affect the way we think about our lives? Okay. Now, how would we think about our lives if we did not die? How do I? Oh, there we go. Yeah, okay. Well. Oh yeah, this is kind of fun. I thought I'll name this view. And I'm going to call this view mortalism. It's the view that there's a day we die, life goes on, we will no longer actively participate, and it's good that we die. Okay, I'm going to call that mortalism. Okay? It doesn't matter. Okay. Now, here's my first observation. Okay? Because we die, we can think of our life as a whole. Okay? Death actually is this sort of, for each of you, it's this sort of imaginary vantage point from which you can feel like you see your whole life. Right? So notice, the very first thing, very simple little observation: because you die, you get to think of your life as a whole. Okay? Okay? There is this wonderful relationship between this couple, Jean-Paul Sartre and his partner Simone de Beauvoir. And when Sartre was sort of in the last couple years of his life, and he had cancer, he was really struggling with it and so on, Simone de Beauvoir decided to start writing a journal of the conversations that they were having, of the talks they were having, and which she later published in a book called Adieu. And it's really wonderful to see, and it's just, I just had such respect for her in reading that, what a very giving thing that was. And one day she says to him, as they're getting ready to have another day of kind of talking about things, she says to him, "I'd like to ask you in a very general way how you see your life as a whole." And I thought, wow, what a question. Isn't that a terrific question? I mean, there's other ways she might have said it, like, tell me the meaning of your life. What is the sense of your life? Tell me about who you are. I mean, okay, but she puts it in that way. She uses that sort of metaphor of looking at the life as a whole. And I just thought that was really wonderful. And it's clear that if we're going to be interested in remembering the fact that we die, this is one of the things that death enables us to do, to think about it as one piece. Later on, she writes that Sartre said this: "I accept myself entirely, and I feel that I am exactly what I wanted to be. So when I die, I shall be content. Displeased at dying that particular day rather than 10 years later, but content." Okay, so about his whole life, he says this. Okay? I got interested in collecting what people say. Last words. David Hume says this. He's a British philosopher who lived in the 18th century, and he died at the age of 65. He says, "In spring 1775, I was struck with a disorder in my bowels, which at first gave me no alarm, but has since, as I apprehend it, become mortal and incurable. I now reckon upon a speedy dissolution. I have suffered very little pain from my disorder, and what is more strange, have, notwithstanding the great decline of my person, never suffered a moment's abatement of my spirits, insomuch that were I to name a period of my life which I should most choose to pass over again, I might be tempted to point to this later period. I possess the same ardor as ever in study, and the same gaiety in company. I consider besides that a man of 65 by dying cuts off only a few years of infirmities, and though I see many symptoms of my literary reputations breaking out, at last with additional luster, I know that I have but few years to enjoy it. It's difficult to be more detached from life than I am at present. This is Michel de Montaigne, 16th century. He died at the age of 59. I am now ready to leave, thank God. Whenever he pleases, regretting nothing except life itself. If its loss should happen to weigh heavy on me, I am untying all the knots. I have already half said my adieus to everyone but myself. No man has ever prepared to leave the world more simply nor more fully than I have. No one has more completely let go of everything than I tried to do. Very similar, very interesting things that people are saying, knowing that they are about to die. But not everybody's happy. Christopher Hitchens, who died just about four years ago, when he was told that he has cancer and he was going to die, he began writing a book called Mortality. And in it, he says at this point, I have been taunting the reaper into taking a free scythe in my direction and have now succumbed to something so predictable and banal that it bores even me. Rage would be beside the point for the same reason. Instead, I am badly oppressed by the gnawing sense of waste. I had real plans for my next decade and felt I'd worked hard enough to earn it. Will I really not live to see my children married? You could see. Okay. He's actually making an interesting, there's a lot of interesting things in here, but one, this business about his talking about cancer is just predictable and banal, how boring to die of cancer. And actually, I think he's saying something really interesting. It's just, it takes years to build one of these things. Well, okay? It just takes all kinds of miraculous sort of events to take place that make one of these human beings that can stand up and look at the world. And then something so stupid can take it apart. And you just think that if something is going to, if something in nature is going to take apart a human being, it should be really exciting and dramatic, okay? But no, it's just cells that decide they're going to continue multiplying. Come on. So you can understand what he's saying. Okay, so we can look at our life as a whole because we die. Another thing to notice is that death and aging, you got to see the two of them together. In fact, sometimes I think death and aging are just kind of the same thing. Okay, and there's a interesting German philosopher who says very much this, and because you say, well, when does the dying process start? Well, some people say it starts the moment you're born. You start breaking down. Okay, well, anyway, the thing is, death and aging actually give structure to our lives. They make our lives seem like it's not just a straight line, but in fact, it has length. You know that. That's what death does. Death says it's going to go so far. And it has trajectory. And that's what aging does. There's this kind of acceleration of growth, okay, and flourishing and so on. And then it begins to decline. And there are, so it's very natural for us to start using metaphors in talking about death of things like journey, trial, battle, okay, a canvas on which the life is painted. So because death and aging give our lives structure, we start working with that structure in metaphorical ways, okay? And we start thinking of ourselves as, on this journey over a lifetime, okay? And so you can see something like this passage from Shakespeare, from As You Like It. The infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, the whining schoolboy with his satchel, the love, sighing like furnace, a soldier full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, the justice in fair round belly, the sixth stage shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, Last scene of all, second childishness and mere oblivion, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. Stages. Going through the stages of life. Okay? And Bertrand Russell, this nice passage. An individual human existence should be like a river. I like this metaphor, okay? Small at first, narrowly contained within its banks and rushing passionately past rocks and over waterfalls. Gradually the river grows wider, the banks recede, the waters flow more quietly, and in the end, without any visible break, they become merged in the sea and painlessly lose their individual being. Where in this description would you see yourself? Okay? Or is it still rushing along, or is it widening? Okay, for me it's widening. The man who in old age can see his life in this way will not suffer from the fear of death. And if with the decay of vitality weariness increases, the thought of rest will not be unwelcome. I should wish to die while still at work, knowing that others will carry on what I no longer do, and content in the thought that what was possible has been done. Okay? This is metaphorical talk. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, these are images that we're using because we know that there is this thing out there that's going to happen. Now, psychologist Carl Jung, who really spent a lot of time talking about human lives as going through stages, there's this nice passage in which we'll look at the image. The 180 degrees of the arc of life are divisible into 4 parts. The first quarter, lying to the east, is childhood, the state in which we are a problem for others, but are not yet conscious of any problems of our own. Conscious problems will fill out the second and third quarters, while in the last, in extreme old age, we descend again into consciousness where, regardless of our state of consciousness, we once more become something of a problem for others. So it's a basic, so it's really great. You just got to end up back where you were. Okay. Third point, and this is really related to what I just got through saying. If you think about it, mortality shapes our sense of personal identity. We sort of tend to answer the question, who are you, where did you come from, where are you going, in terms of what time period we were born in. So if you think about it, you know, each one of us would see ourselves as being part of a certain cohort group or a generation, okay? And it's through that connection, not only that you sort of identify yourself, define who you are, but you feel a connection to other people, okay? So we really can say we don't die alone. You know, we're going to die along with our cohort group, you know, okay? So, you know, like, here's that standard sort of sociologist's idea of you know, the generations, okay? You know, where are you up here, okay? And what's going on with that group? So in my case, you know, I would say, and there's some of us here, you know, I grew up I really became sort of aware in the 60s and the 50s and 60s. So I remember the assassinations, and I remember Vietnam and things like that. And so I relate to other people in those terms. We see each other and we know that we've been through many of the same kinds of experiences. And of course, one thing about all of us here is we're all here, everyone here is alive, and we're living through the Trump era, okay? And that's something that, you know, years from now you will always remember. You'll never forget this, okay? This is so unlike anything we've seen, okay? But this is connected to your sense of yourself and who you are, how you identify yourself, well, where am I, okay? But it's also connected with a sense that you have that you are related to other people, okay? And you will get to a point where you begin watching the obituaries. Who watches the obituaries? Just me? You watch the obituaries. You want to see, you know, how old are they? People die so young. It's really shocking. You know, how old? Somebody's got to do something about this. We'll get Trump on this. People, and then you look for people that you know. Oh, I just saw a student of mine. A student of mine died just a week or two ago. Good grief. What is going on? You know, she'd been out. I'd see her periodically out in the community, and bingo, there she is. And it's unfair. That's okay. Here's Oliver Sacks has something to say about that. I've been increasingly conscious for the last 10 years or so of deaths among my contemporaries, my generation, is on the way out. And each death I have felt as an abruption, a tearing away of part of myself. There will be no one like us when we are gone. And it's either he or someone else who goes on to say something like, yes, you know, a generation turns out to be, as we look back on it, a way of being human, a way of living this life. And it does pass. Now, okay, another couple points. This is interesting. I'm not entirely sure what to make of this, but it just seems so true that because we die, some of the events of our lives take on really special meaning. I mean, for example, if you think, like, you know, has anybody here seen Halley's Comet? Oh, wow. Okay, well, you won't again. You will not again. I missed it when it came, so I will never get to see it. Now, there are events of that sort. Big deal, okay? But there are events that will, in your lifetime, happen only once, okay? And if you were immortal, no big deal. It would not matter to you at all, because you can always see Halley's Comet the next 79 years. You'll pick it up then. If you're immortal, then the number of sunsets that you see, the number of moonrises that you see is infinite, okay? But if you're one of us, the special few, the mortals, you get only so many moonrises, only so many sunsets that you will see, only so many times that you'll see your children, okay? Or you'll lose a pet, something like that. You know, think of the things in your life that really matter to you and ask, to what extent, you know, is that affected by the fact that you are mortal? And I think you'll find such things, okay? So the events that we face, they are shaped by this. There's this wonderful line from the novelist Paul Bowles. He says, because we don't know when we will die, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well. Yet everything happens only a certain number of times. Now I just want to stop him for a minute and say, well, you know, when you get to be my age, no, it doesn't feel like an inexhaustible well anymore. Who's he talking to? He's not really talking to me, okay? Because, no, I don't have like an infinite number. Yet everything happens only a certain number of times. Yes, that's right. And a very small number, really. How many more times will you remember a certain afternoon of your childhood? Some afternoon that's so deeply a part of your being that you can't even conceive of your life without it. Perhaps 4 or 5 times more. Perhaps not even that. How many more times will you watch the full moon rise? Perhaps 20. And yet it all seems so limitless. Okay? Not if you pay attention to your mortality. One last interesting point about what mortality does for us. It affects morality. It affects our sense of morality. Okay? Because we die, it actually has significant implications for how we value things and how we value our own actions and our character. Just in a very simple way, there is what I would call the last kindness that each of us has available to us, but not many people take advantage of it. Think of this. Someday you're going to die, and that somebody else is going to be doing things. Where do you want to go? Where are we going to place him? Okay, what are you going to do with his stuff? Where does his cat go? Where does his house go? And stuff like that. You can do a kindness, the last kindness, by actually leaving instructions about how it is you'd like those things to be handled. So that I watched my aunt and my mom and my dad, they had little booklets. I want this played, I want to go to this cemetery, here's my plot. And I remember my sister and I were just thinking, this was really, really neat of them to do this. This was really a wonderful thing. Not only that, there was actually a bit of joy involved in the activity of following their instructions. This is what she wanted. What a nice thing to do. That's because we're mortal, okay? And it's also true that our character gets formed within a context in which we cannot do everything. right? We have to make choices. I can only do such certain things. I can't do this. Or if I do this one, then I'm not going to be able to do that one. So mortality puts a constraint on how we can express and develop and create our own moral character. Okay? Furthermore, if you take seriously this Socratic idea that the biggest question that you ought to work on is the question, what should I do? Okay? That question really has significance only within a context of mortality, because if you are immortal, you can, what should I do? Whatever I want. I can do whatever I want, okay, because I always have time to go back and do something different. But not if you have a limitation on the time in which you can act. So our mortality is really, it's just these three simple ways, directly connected to what it is to be a being that dies. Now, okay, so that's essentially, in a nutshell, this kind of argument I'm making to say that, see, it is good that we die. These things that I've listed, these 5 things I've listed, I hope you would agree that they are directly connected to the way we think about our lives, and they are possible only because our lives are short, are mortal, okay? We don't live forever. So if I'm right, and if you're kind of convinced that it's good that we die, then that has implications for our mythic idea of immortality. It really does. It would suggest that to imagine ourselves as immortal, or to work towards immortality, maybe even that, but to imagine ourselves as immortal would be to imagine ourselves as extremely different kinds of creatures. And what I'm wondering is, would we have to say that we just couldn't understand it because it's not understandable? I mean, what is it? Is it that it's just not possible that human beings could be immortal? Or is it just that human beings who are immortal would just be such different creatures that we really couldn't relate to the lives that they have? We wouldn't understand it. Wouldn't make any sense to us. How can you live your life in such a way? That's what I'll leave you with. I don't know the answer. I don't think I don't see the argument that we have to be mortal. I don't see that argument. But I do think that given that we are mortal, okay, it turns out that it has an enormous effects on how we think of what it is to be a human being, what it is to be alive. So okay. Thoughts, questions? What do you think? Yes?
I have 2 thoughts.
Yeah.
One of them is that because we are mortal, that plays a huge part in how we build our societies and
Yes.
what we create, what we come up with. We only have a certain amount of time to produce something creative or something useful.
Right.
We can only create so much productivity, and that perhaps motivates us to do things. Whereas if we were
Yes.
immortal, we would probably be a lazier people who would get to things later. It doesn't matter now, does it? Because you can live forever.
Yeah.
And, what was the other thing I was going to say? I think that if we found a way to become immortal, let's say the person who was capable of having their body genetically altered to the point where they could be immortal, I could easily see that person eventually killing themselves because we...
Did you say killing themselves?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because to have an immortal life is to make everything kind of dull or sour. Nothing seems
Yeah.
special anymore.
Yeah.
Everything has to be momentary to make it special, at least how humans perceive things
Yeah.
and find things. But if everything were always there forever and we could enjoy it at our own pace, nothing seems to matter anymore.
So you're expressing actually an argument that's attributed to Bernard Williams. In 1973, he wrote an essay basically making this very same point. It's called the Macropolis case. You might want to look it up. His argument in favor of mortality and against immortality is that immortality would be a kind of existence that would drive us into
Crazy.
utter boredom. Yeah, and so nobody would want to do that. They would kill themselves. He thinks. So that's one of the arguments that I regard as that I'd be part of. Part of this view that mortality is better to immortality. And that's good. Yeah, Doug.
Even better, by the way, before Bernard Williams, a couple of episodes in the ancient original Twilight Zone series about people that achieve immortality, and it's not what it's been.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
My question
Yeah.
is, does having children figure into your equation? I know for me, it does. Or
Yes.
in my work as a rabbi over the years, it's not a great, shock that people deal with the deaths of their parents, their spouses, pretty well, even their own death, and
Yeah.
certainly their
Yeah.
siblings' death. That's like, you don't even think about that. But the death of their children
Right.
is devastating, and people
Right.
never get over it.
Right.
Because I think many people, including myself, as having children, essentially kind of like immortality.
It is. Do you remember, oh, what's that? Oh, do you remember that I had on the list, there's a day I will die, life will go on, and I won't be there to participate. That second point, life goes on, that's actually really crucial to what I would regard as a philosophically healthy view about death. And it's related to this. One of the things that it seems to me matters maybe as much or even more than the notion of living forever is the notion that the things that matter to us go on.
So it might not even be, it might not have to be biological.
Correct.
It could be that you're an influential philosopher.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that I think worries me the most about the way the world is going is, of course, I wouldn't like to see human beings die out, but almost less, I just think it would be such a tragedy if there were no longer creatures who could enjoy Mozart, Shakespeare, yada yada, okay? Philosophy, science, and so on. That the things that those things are things in life that make life really worthwhile, okay? And to imagine that that would disappear it seems to me almost worse, So yeah, I agree with that. It's a really important piece. And because you do have things that you love and you can feel like safe that they're going to go on, maybe they're your children or maybe they're, your commitment to art or something like that, I think it makes it easier to accept your own mortality. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You said at the beginning that it's good that we die, and then you also said that we should try to live as long as possible.
Yeah.
And with the advancement of medical technology,
Yeah.
we've gone from, 30 years life expectancy up to, what is it now, 70?
Yeah.
But what would you expect the cutoff to be before it becomes like, all right, it's time for you to die? Like,
I don't know.
You've lived for a millennium or an eon or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
You know.
But I don't know. But listen to these three possibilities. A, we leave things just the way they are. People die at around 78. Or life expectancy is around 78. B, we manage to prolong life expectancy such that people live into their hundreds, maybe 150. C, we become immortal. No death at all. I think C is the worst. A and B still have endings, and that makes all the difference in how you think of life, that you know it's going to end. But the people living in C, I don't understand them. I don't know if that answers your question, but it seems to me is that it's kind of immaterial if we're how long we're able to prolong human life, as long as we cannot prolong it for eternity. I mean, maybe there's...
So it can reach 10,000 years and still be acceptable.
Well,
or
that becomes...
20,000.
Yeah.
I know that's way down the road.
Yeah, it really
before
is.
we have
But
the
think
technology
of
for that.
think of the things that would have to change. What would the stages of life be like if the normal human life expectancy was 10,000 years? Would there be stages of life? Would there be, what would that journey, think of the metaphor of the journey, what would that journey be like? Is it just continuous mountain climbing? What is it? You see, those are the kinds of questions that I'd want to think of. What's life going to look like if we're 10,000 years in length? Yes.
I actually think one has to, in that question, James, you were saying, if we could make someone live longer, when do you stop? One would also have to take into account too, not particularly positive things, but things that are necessary to think about. One is which the human body will still go through its processes of breaking down, even if you could.
Yeah.
We're talking about manipulating the body as it stands now.
Yeah.
So to have it continue on, you would get to a point fairly quickly where it would no longer be able to do things.
Right.
Which brings me to my second point. People often think about, okay, though everyone matters, we only have this much supplies in the way of taking care of them, this many people who can stop their lives to help take care of this person. At what point, not only is a person incapable of doing things, but at what point does a person become inconvenient?
Right,
And
right.
Unfortunately, people
Right.
can be considered inconvenient.
Yeah.
There isn't someone to take
So
care
Mary,
of.
are you saying that, sorry,
No, go ahead.
but are you saying that in order for there to be prolonged longevity of life, we would also have to have people be more responsible with their reproductive action, in that we don't have more and more people copulating and creating more and more
Certainly that would be one
people
element of
straining on the
it.
system?
Certainly that would be one element of it, but what I was getting at is taking into account that the human body cannot, if you make the body as it stands now live to 200 years, it's not going to be running around like a 20-year-old.
Right.
So that being the case, I don't think we would, even if we had the possibility of doing that, I don't believe we would, simply because of all the negative side effects that come with it of making someone live that long. Furthermore, they may not want to live that long. They may at first decide, yes, this is a great idea, and then the process is irreversible, and then they no longer want to.
Let me shift the issue slightly. Suppose the issue were not so much how do we get the human body to remain vital and so on, but the issue becomes how long can we keep a computer going? Okay? Because that could be the new human being. See what I mean?
Well, my thought was why would we want to?
Bob,
Jonathan.
Not to say that this is something I ascribe to, but the ancients would say this is foolishness to think that you're going to prolong an old body.
Oh, okay.
They would say that the body dies,
Yeah.
but then there is a new life that then
Uh-huh.
follows. And the same with computers.
Right.
I mean, the computer may die, but the ideas that are on it
Right.
will certainly continue.
Well, they're in the cloud.
I mean,
We'll just shift them over to the next-
prolonging an old body is really, really dumb. They
Yeah,
would
these
say.
two guys, they do that stuff all the time. Put human beings in the cloud. Well, anyway, I would say, if you're going to, like continue and you want with this kind of subject, think about the differences between, on the one hand, prolonging, and on the other hand, immortality. So that's what I was working on. Well, what is the significance of death? What is death? Death is the end of having a life. So what's the significance of that? Okay, you can drag it out as long as you want to if you can work out the details, but what's the significance of the fact that this is all going to come to an end for that person? That's what I find interesting. So
Brendan has a question.
next,
Brendan.
or how are we doing?
We're doing great.
Okay.
Yeah. I think our time is okay. We're at,
Does anybody have a last thought? Are we looking for last thoughts?
no,
or-
I had a question.
He had a question.
Oh,
Yeah. So does John. I'll ask my question. I agree with you that it's good that there is an ending of human life.
Yeah.
It brings a perspective from which we can experience appreciate a totality of our existence. You mentioned the stages.
Yeah.
And if we were immortal, no stages, raises questions about what form of life that would be, whether we could even identify at all with it, understand it. But what about the possibility of inserting a stage of prolonged creativity with the sort of
Right.
sensibilities that we're talking
Right.
about? Creativity that's rooted in human excellences
Uh-huh.
that we are currently perhaps
Right.
not able fully
Right.
to enjoy, to develop.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me that,
Yeah.
that insertion of extra time
Mm-hmm.
for creative actualization of possibilities that otherwise aren't
Mm-hmm.
available maintains the benefits of the ending
Right.
at the same time as it
Right.
packs some extra goods.
Right, yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you distinguish between A and B and C,
Uh-huh.
I agree, C not so good, but B
B could be, yeah.
could be an
Yeah.
additional benefit over.
Oh, indeed, and I think it's really interesting to think of, if we're going to prolong life, what does that mean? Prolonging youth? Would that mean, you're a baby for 20 years? Or would it mean like, I see your point. And what we would want to do, I think, is in some way prolong the productive years, the years of thriving and so on. Which means that, my time may be basically coming to an end. Yes, because I'm not or at least I'll just keep. But you can see how,
But that extra
Republicans
period of
wouldn't like
creativity
this.
would be sweeter because of the death as well.
Yes, that's true. But anyway, yeah, where are you going to prolong it? That's a good question. Leslie?
On April 6th, my family celebrated my dad's 102nd birthday.
Uh-huh.
And that's why I'm here. I just wanted to...
Oh, interesting.
What it's like. And Brendan, you just mentioned creativity. He is still very creative. He doesn't get around like he used to. He has somebody helping to take care of him. But his creative process is wonderful. He is friends with a former president of the University of Connecticut who lives in, I don't know, down south somewhere, and they correspond, joking about how they're going to send each other to jail. Or, I don't know, he's just very creative
Yeah.
in his old
Yeah.
age.
Yeah.
I don't think of him as old.
Yeah. Did you like the little, the end-of-life statements like from Hume and Montaigne and so on, and wonder if you could relate your father to one of those views. He's not Christopher Hitchens. I feel sorry for Christopher Hitchens. I like him a lot, but he got a raw deal. Okay, that's the bad life. You see, the bad death. I mean.
Ask him, how do you view your whole life? What did Simone de Beauvoir
Yeah. Yeah.
want to hint that
Your life as a whole.
it's, coming to an end, because he, after his birthday, said, okay, so we'll celebrate the 103rd birthday
So-
next year.
Are you saying you'd be uncomfortable asking him to tell you about his life? Because that's all you would need to say. Tell me about your life. What's your life been like?
How do you feel about your whole life? How did she...
She said, tell me about what you think of your life as a whole.
If you're dead, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she didn't say up till now. She said life as a whole, as though she wanted to have him look at it from the point at which it's going to end. Tell me about that. I like that image.
To guess something, my grandmother, I don't really talk about it, but we know for a fact that she has exactly 8 years to live. And I've been thinking about things to do just to spend more time with her, because I'm 7 hours away from home, school here. I don't get to see her a lot. But, you're his daughter, and you're so close. Just usually when you want to find out more about people, just ask a very simple question. You listen, and they'll tell you everything. So just, Dad, tell me about your life.
Yeah.
They'll probably hear
Yeah.
everything you want to.
Yeah. Jonathan?
Two things. First is that you are a national treasure, and I thank you for coming back.
Oh, go on.
Shaw.
Yeah, Pshaw, yeah.
And secondly, it seems to me your argument is not so much that death is good,
Okay.
but just that death is. It exists for all of us, and to deny it would be folly, and it makes us who we are. It gives our lives meaning. Go ahead.
But you're just saying good things about it.
I am. However, let me ask you this. I can imagine, and can you or would you deny, that right now in some alternative universe,
Uh-huh.
your doppelganger, in a universe where people are immortal, is giving a lecture that immortality is good.
Okay. Uh-huh. Yeah. I want to understand that. I mean, I want to call him up. Explain it to me. I don't get it.
Because
Do you guys have stages of life? Do you guys, yeah.
they don't.
Do you guys think about your lives as a whole? No, you can't.
they don't.
Okay. Do you guys worry about whether you've done the right thing? No, they don't. They
No,
don't. Okay.
Well, maybe. That one I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
and,
Number 5,
and how do you identify yourself with all the people around you? Do you feel like,
generations.
yeah,
Yeah. But
Doesn't-
you and I think all those things you just listed are good because we have no choice. That's who we are.
Well-
if you live in the immortal planet Earth,
Yeah.
however they live, they
Yeah.
would define as good.
yeah. Okay, so So Alistair McIntyre, who says, he's a philosopher, and he says, human beings are storytellers. They tell stories, and they explain things with a narrative structure.
Right.
They explain things as changes through time with an incipient, a development, and then a resolution. Okay, and he says this is how we talk about ourselves and our own identity. Now, if you try to put that into a context of immortality in which there is no, then where is the middle?
Yeah.
You know, you can see the beginning, but you know, if am I middle-aged? Am I beyond middle age? Well, not if we're infinite.
Yeah.
So it's just like, well, I don't understand. What would the narrative structure be like, except ba 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 forever? You know, just.
But you and I think narrative structure is good because we have no choice, because we know there's an end. So of course we're going to define that as good.
I don't know that. I feel like I have a choice. I didn't have to. As soon as my mom and dad kind of let me think on my own, I would have said, poop on this. I'm not going to, you know, I don't have to think that way anymore. In fact, I mean, you know, Bob would say, I think Bob would say, there are lots of people out there who thinks there's not just one self, there's not just a whole lifetime as a whole, there's many little lifetimes, okay? Which Joe actually might, you know, want to buy into, okay? That there's many kind of selves. In fact, you know, who's a guy, just thinks that self, there is no such thing as a self, you know? I'm thinking of Galen Strawson, Galen Strawson, So it's really kind of a metaphor a set of metaphors that I think I'm talking about they're sort of deep in our way of thinking about life. And you're right. Maybe it's possible that we could have thought about life in some different way. I don't know what that would be. So it's interesting. This is not a Kantian transcendental deduction. You know, for those who know, this is not a set of necessary truths. It seems to me to be observations about a concept, a way that we, you know, think about our lives. Maybe we could change thinking. I don't know what it would look like, though. That's the problem with shifting conceptual frameworks. You know, how do I think about it? How do I think about consciousness being outside the brain?
He's really asked a question for a while.
MJ Endeavor.
Next.
Two things. One very quickly, the mention of prolonging of life. I think one thing that would probably be key there in terms of keeping some of the same form of your ideas would be whether it's prolonged for everyone. If you know, you just have somebody who, for whatever reason, can live to be 200, their stage of generation at some point is going to be meaningless when everyone they knew in the past 100 years that has, has died or something. So, but there's this debate as to, you know, how much prolonging life would be good, but couldn't you argue that a shorter life might be better because then there are fewer sunsets? There are perhaps in the world not like a Logan's Run-esque world where you're, you know, literally killed at 21 or 30, depending on whether we're a book or a movie. But suppose but suppose someone is diagnosed with some incurable disease and they know that they are going to die by 30, and this is a pretty solid fact about their life, and you know, perhaps it's not something that's going to be terribly debilitating, but you know, actually a good pop culture reference might be the old show Run for Your Life, which he was all healthy until it was going to be the end. So, you know, and in that sense, he's, you know, going around the world doing all these things because he knows there's no point in staying in his law firm because he's going to be dead in 18 months or 2 years or a year, depending on what season it is and the intro. So couldn't you argue in a sense that that life might be a better one than the one the rest of us are living?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting observation, sure.
So maybe it's not better to live longer.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
And just quickly off that thought, I keep thinking that it's important that we don't know when we're going to die. Like, if we can choose, that's a different mortality. we set the end date, we still have one, so that's even a better thing to look forward to.
Yeah.
You know, we all had to hold this stuff so
Yeah.
precious because we only have a set amount. We
Yeah.
kind of have a general idea of maybe how many we'll get, but we're never sure. So it's that seems to be the important part, is that we don't know our.
I think that's a really interesting point. You know, if you think about, there is a day I die, I think we'd all say that's true. What do you know about that day? Okay? And we don't know when it is, except in the case of those who've been, you know, condemned to death. Okay? But most of us don't know when that is. And that's really interesting, I think. So I like that point. Oh. Yeah. John?
First of all, there's that old question out there, who would like to live to be 96? And the answer is somebody who's in good health and is 95.
Right, that's right. That's good.
I'm just thinking it out because it's an interesting argument to make. I don't think I want to be immortal. I don't think I want to die either. I'm sort of in between, you know? I mean, if somebody said, hey, John, you can die today, I'd say, well, no thanks. I think I'll keep going. Even though it's a good. My buddy Bob Johnson tells me it's a good thing. I said, no, I think I'll wait a little while. You just go find somebody else to take the offer.
Yeah.
So I'm in between. What would you comment on that for me?
Well, I think the gist of my argument is simply don't overlook the significance of the ending relative to a life. An ending is extremely important. So that's what I would ask you to think about. So, so I'm not saying anything about, you know, how long you want to live and the quality of your life.
Let's extend
Sure.
it a little longer.
Sure.
Okay.
But you said extend, okay? And I'm saying, what are you doing about the ending? Is that going to be there?
Well,
or are you trying?
At the moment, yes.
Yeah.
I don't think I would like to live 10,000 years.
Right.
But I might like to live to be 75.
Right.
You know, I mean, 1 year at a time is not a
Yeah.
policy.
David Hume, he dies at what, 62? And he says, you know, it would have been nice to have 10 more years, but hey, that's okay.
Sure. I
Yeah.
totally agree.
But yeah, to have 10 more years, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
I'm just saying, it's tough to say I want
Yeah.
to be immortal, but it's tough to say I want to die tomorrow too. It's
Okay.
sort of in the middle.
Okay, but I'm saying, but I guess I'd be saying to you, think about not having an ending at all.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what I'd like you to think about. What's the significance of the fact that it comes to an end?
Deb has a question. Maybe Deb
Yeah, well, it's tied to a lot of things that we've been talking about. And I'll admit, I've only dipped my toe in philosophical waters, but I from a school that required religious...
Did your toe drop off?
No,
Yeah, okay.
it actually wants more.
Oh, okay, it wants more.
So, especially with the rabbi here, because I'm kind of curious about this. Because as a scientist, I like to put things in their boxes. I like to label them and make things organized. And on that, with that question of where do we, the very first question, where should we locate the significance?
Yeah, where should we, right.
So I think back to learning about all these different religions
Right.
around the world.
Right.
That's my
Right.
organizing thought.
Mhm.
Because in some religions,
Mhm.
you get do-overs in reincarnation, and those help you get to a better place. Like you have to die to get to a better place. Like when you reincarnate.
That's right, right.
But in a lot of our Western religions, we're scared to death of it, and some religions aren't. And so like I can see that contextually based in religion. So what would an atheist think about that same question?
Well, I think, I am one. So he thinks this. He thinks all this. I don't mean to be cute, but
No. Well, no.
but
I mean, that's what the question is.
you know, when I started out on this whole subject, I really did think of it as, okay, look, there's this event called death, and then there's what happens after, and there's what comes before. So one of the questions is, what happens to me when I die? Okay, but the other question is, the one more about, you know, the other question is, what do I make of myself because I die? And what I found was that if I started to study and look at all the religions and so on and how they answer the question, what happens to me when I die, I found myself feeling disingenuous. I found myself involved in divisive kinds of arguments, claims that didn't make sense to me, okay? And so then I thought, okay, And I tried to write about this. I tried to, explain why it is that I'm not a Buddhist, why I'm not a Christian, why I'm not a Muslim, and so on.
That judgment.
Oh, yes, I get to make, yes, but it's my life. I get to make judgments, and my judgments are, no, I don't go, here's this theory, I can't live with that. I can't understand that theory. Okay? So, going back into looking at the question, well, what do I make of the fact that, this life of mine comes to an end? And that's what I found to be not only kind of rich and interesting, but something that it seems to me anybody, religious or not, could sign off on, could say, yeah, you're right about that. And that's what I was kind of looking for. I think everybody, no matter what your religion, would agree. There's a day when you die, life will go on, and you won't be there.
Absolutely. And
That says nothing about what's going to happen to you. It just says
it makes
this.
it almost easier to answer those.
What's it?
To answer that question.
What's that?
Religion gives you the structure or the context to answer the question.
Well,
of
it does you. It does you. Presumably.
But, well, no, I don't follow any religion.
Yeah.
I just like to hear
Yeah.
the tradition.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
I can
yeah.
see it like, well, Christianity or Catholics.
Yeah.
It's like, well, God decides where I'm going to go forever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well. Yeah.
We'll be reincarnated.
Yeah. Okay.
So we are 1 hour in. I don't know if you want to take another question or so.
Oh, I just want to see what Tersh had to say, and
Yes,
then we'll quit.
I was just going to mention that Wallace Stevens, the poet, was dealing with some of these questions in the 20s, and he'd obviously been reading Keats, a poet 100 years before that. But he came out with this phrase that I thought was just wonderful: "Death is the mother of beauty."
Death is the mother of beauty.
So he's saying that death not only gives us this limit, but it also gives us value. We wouldn't understand beauty if we were immortal.
Oh, I like that.
Kind of how I feel.
That's nice.
I wonder,
My students are like, what? When they hear that one. Death is the mother of beauty.
Well, death is the mother of lots of things, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I don't want to make too much of it and make it feel all big and important, but death is the mother of lots of things. Looks like. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you all very much. And